Welcome to the first webinar in Florida Institute for Child Welfare's Cultivating Belonging webinar series. I am incredibly excited to kick off this series with our wonderful presenter, Heather Tosig, who is a professor at the University of Denver and the developer and director of Fostering Healthy Futures. I know that Heather, you have some introductions for yourself. So with that, I am going to pass the torch off to you.
Thank you so much, Zoe, and thank you for inviting me to share. Greetings from very snowy Denver. I hear that it's much warmer in Florida. I am going to share my screen and get started. Would really welcome lots of questions and discussions at the end, so please do share questions in the Q&A. So today, as Zoe said, I'm going to be talking about using a positive youth development approach to foster healthy futures. And I am going to be talking about our Fostering Healthy Futures program. But I'm hoping that woven into this presentation are some key takeaways for those of you who work directly with young people and their families in terms of ways that you might empower young people, again, to foster their own healthy futures. As Zoe said, I'm affiliated with the University of Denver Graduate School of Social Work. I'm a professor there, but I also have a joint appointment at the Kemp Center for the Prevention and Treatment of Child Abuse and Neglect, which is in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. The major funders of this work are shown on this slide, and I do want to state that the opinions offered in this presentation are mine only and don't represent the opinions of my and our funders. As you all probably know, nobody does this work with young people with child welfare involvement alone. And so really takes a village of collaborators, both from human services as well as children's and families, social ecologies, to an incredible staff. And first and foremost, even though they're listed last, the children and families who have agreed to participate in our, clinical research endeavors that have developed the evidence base around the program Fostering Healthy Futures that I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to give you some very quick background on Fostering Healthy Futures before I jump backwards and talk about how the program was developed. So the participants in our two programs, we have a preteen and a teen program. The preteen program is for children ages 9 to 11 who have current or prior child welfare involvement. We did test the program with children who were recently placed into out-of-home care, but now as we seek to expand the reach and scale the program, we are offering it to children pre-adolescents, again, with current or previous child welfare involvement. Our teen program is for 8th and 9th graders, that critical transition age between middle school and high school. And again, it is offered for children with current or teens with current or prior child welfare involvement. That program was tested with children or teens who had open child welfare cases, and over half of them were at home when the program started. So both programs are 9 months long, and in the traditional way, we have implemented this program, and it's been implemented now for over 20 years. We provide one-on-one mentoring that is provided by graduate students. As we, again, seek to scale and to serve young people in more rural areas, for example, we are looking at other models of mentoring because there isn't an abundance of graduate students. But this program has really served as a training opportunity for graduate students who do their internship with the Fostering Healthy Futures program. And then finally, both programs consist of skills training. In the preteen program, there's a weekly skills group, and in the teen program, that skills training is provided by mentors. Both programs have been tested through randomized controlled trials. If you don't know what that is, I'll try to explain as we go. And both have long-term follow-up. So we've looked at both short-term and longer-term outcomes in both of these programs. So I'm going to back up now to the development of this program and tell you a little bit about my background in training and how this came to be. So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and at age 16 started volunteering at a shelter called Casa de los Niños. It was a shelter where children would often stay, unfortunately, for months, when they were awaiting a foster home, typically, sometimes in between foster home placements. Kinship care was not a placement option for young people, formal sort of kinship care in the way we know it today. Yes, I am that old. So, but what was really powerful for me in doing that work, and I also worked there throughout college in the summers, was, I was being allowed to read the children's case files, and I saw the many adversities they had experienced in their young lives, and yet I was blown away by an overused term, but really their resilience. And not to say that they weren't, didn't have some challenging emotional behavioral challenges, but that they were also wanting to experience life like every other child that I had babysat or worked in a camp with, and those kinds of things. And so I was really struck by their ability to navigate the challenges that they had seen in such a positive way. I was trained as a clinical psychologist, and at the same time I began my clinical training, I started volunteering to be a mentor for a young person with significant mental health challenges. And so I was just doing that volunteer work on the side. And what really struck me was how, without sort of the confines of the 50-minute hour in my office as a therapist, without those confines, when I was being a mentor, I could really work with this young person in their community to help them build skills. I could share more of my own experiences. I wasn't sort of beholden to one therapeutic model or a certain number of sessions. And so I really, it sort of planted a seed for the development of this program. Fast forward, about 8 years. And to think that, a one-on-one mentoring in young people's communities could have therapeutic outcomes. My dissertation then was a 6-year follow-up of children who'd been placed in out-of-home care 6 years prior. And I interviewed them about both risk and protective factors for adverse outcomes in adolescence. And that included things like juvenile justice involvement, suicidality, substance use, and sexual risk behaviors or unintended early pregnancies. And what I found in doing this follow-up when young people were about 12 to 17 was that the age of initiation of some of these riskier behaviors was about 12. Now, I had wanted to work with teens my whole career, and yet I was doing a postdoctoral fellowship with David Olds, who's the developer of the Nurse Family Partnership. And he said to me very clearly, if you're trying to prevent some of these adolescent risk behaviors and their associated outcomes, you're going to have to start earlier. And so that's how we started, quite honestly, with 9 to 11-year-olds, was trying to prevent some of the more serious risky behaviors and associated consequences. However, 12 years later, we did develop an adaptation, again, the Fostering Healthy Futures for Teens program, which I will tell you about today. We then ran focus groups, and we ran focus groups with all constituents. So at that point, kinship care was beginning to be a placement option for young people. So we ran focus groups with foster parents, kinship families, children who had been served by mentors, like in Big Brothers Big Sisters program, mentors who had been mentors for children in foster care, and really importantly, caseworkers and child welfare administrators. And caseworkers often said to us, this is why I went to do this kind of work. The kinds of things you're talking about, mentors who are social workers, typically graduate students in training, although we also had some psychology graduate students as well. But the predominant mentoring pool was graduate students in social work. And the caseworker said to us, this is why I came to this work. I wanted to empower young people. I wanted to help build on their strengths and interests. And I wish I could be part of this program for my training. So they were very enthusiastic about the proposed work. And then I also met with many, many community leaders, especially mentoring program executive directors, who talked a lot about how providing mentors for children in care or children who are child welfare involved was incredibly difficult because they moved homes. Getting consent to, even just enroll in their programs was very difficult. And that also solidified my idea to have, again, graduate students serve as the mentors for young people, because they would be getting course credit, they wouldn't leave. And again, these directors of mentoring programs often talked about how retention of mentors, especially for young people who were, changing homes, was just incredibly difficult. And I felt like for young people who'd already experienced a lot of unplanned loss and trauma, that we didn't want that to be happening. So all of those experiences led to me writing a grant to the National Institute of Mental Health and proposing this idea. And we were funded back in 2000. So it's been almost 25 years that we've been doing this work. I didn't have the term positive youth development back in 1999 when I wrote this grant, but it certainly came out of a strengths-based perspective, which is so inherent in social work, which is again now where I hold a professorship. But the positive youth development framework, if you're not familiar with it, it has these 5 and now a 6th tenet of contribution. But the focus is really on rejecting the deficit model that is so often associated with adolescence. We think about all the challenges adolescents have, and we want to really focus on more than just preventing problems and emphasizing the many positive attributes of youth. We want to focus on developing strengths and assets to promote healthy behaviors. And one definition of healthy youth or positive youth development that I really like is research indicates that healthy youth development strategies, the deliberate process of providing all youth with the support, relationship experiences, resources, and opportunities needed to become successful and competent adults, are promising approaches for preventing or reducing a wide range of adolescent health risk behaviors. And again, this was really contrary to my training as a clinical psychologist, where we were very focused on diagnosing and then treating a specific problem. This is much more about, again, providing young people with all of these kinds of things, and then that hopefully leading to a reduction in health risk behaviors. We also know that engagement rates are low when implementing evidence-based programs for young people, especially those in foster care, because of the challenges of transportation, change in guardianship, as well as caregivers. There can be real difficulties engaging young people. So this program was specifically designed initially for young people in some type of out-of-home care. We also believe that a positive youth development approach, where we're approaching families to say we want to provide a mentor and some skills training to help your young person reach their own goals, can really reduce stigma associated, again, with child welfare involvement, and in the young people, and feeling like they have a host of problems. This fosters skill building in real world settings. And a recent article suggests that African American parents, when their children are experiencing mental health challenges, really prefer mentoring to psychological counseling. So again, this may be a much more inclusive approach. And it doesn't just have to be mentoring, and it certainly doesn't have to be fostering healthy futures. But in thinking about approaching families with a positive youth development approach, again, I think we get higher levels of engagement. So there are some things I'd like you to, tools that I'm going to talk about today that might work in your role. And I'm going to talk about components of the FHF program that led to high engagement and retention, strong relationships, skill building, and impactful outcomes. So I'm going to start with the preteen program. Typically, I show tons of pictures of young people in our program because that best exemplifies their experience. But because this is going to be posted on some website, or maybe YouTube, I think Zoe told me, I'm unable to show pictures for which we do not have releases. I do have one slide of pictures, and our website certainly has some pictures with releases, but it'll be less visually enticing, and my apologies for that. So let me tell you a little bit who was enrolled again in our research study initially. We recruited all 9 to 11-year-old children in any type of out-of-home placement in the Denver metro area over 10 years. They had to have been placed in court-ordered out-of-home care over the prior year due to maltreatment, and they had to be in out-of-home care at the onset of the intervention. Now, again, we've opened up as again, we're implementing and disseminating this program through community-based organizations. We have changed the enrollment criteria to again include young people with any type of child welfare involvement, current or previous. We didn't exclude children with significant mental health, cognitive, academic, and behavioral challenges. We didn't exclude children with sexual behavior problems. And this we learned again from our focus groups with a lot of child welfare professionals, that it was going to be important to be as inclusive as possible, assuming we could keep young people safe. And youth continued to participate in the program, even if they changed placements or reunified with parents. And back in the early 2000s, when we started this program, there was a lot of placement and living situation changes, especially for those who are not living with kin, and a lot of reunification as well. So our preteen program consists again of 9 months of one-on-one mentoring. There's 9 months of weekly skills group. Again, mentoring serves as the internship for graduate students. The mentors provide all transportation in the program, and that obviously makes engagement higher, and families, the burden on families much less. It's also, this program is providing respite care 2 times a week for families for the hours that the child is out on mentoring visits and then coming to skills group. Our skills groups are 30 weeks long, or again, run over the 9-month academic year. We have 8 children in each group. These groups are facilitated by mental health clinicians as well as trainees. We have a manualized curriculum where we incorporate components of other evidence-based programs, but also role plays and stories that are unique for children who have child welfare involvement. The way the program and the logistics work is that the mentors are each paired with 2 children, and they spend individual time each week with the children that they mentor, but they bring them to this group site once a week. And during the pandemic, we ended up switching to online groups. And then we kept that up for the year, sort of the second year of the pandemic, which suggests that we may be able to run this program for children who are spread out geographically through an online weekly skills group, although we feel the mentoring really does need to be done in person. But the traditional way this has been implemented is for mentors to pick up their 2 children and bring them to the group. The mentors have their group supervision while the children are in group, and then they come together for this dinner half hour or 45 minutes. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what happens during that time. The goals of the skills group obviously are to improve skills and to process feelings related to the foster care experience. When we've opened this program up more widely now, we talk about all young people experiencing major life stressors. All of the children have experienced ACEs, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and we don't use that term, but we just talk about major life stressors. And then the goals of the group are obviously also to reduce stigma. The key skills I'm not going to go into in too much detail, but we focus on basic social skills initially with young people, healthy coping. There is a unit on change and loss where we talk about mixed emotions. Some young people, their parents' parental rights are going to be terminated, although the language they use is I'm going to be terminated, and freed for adoption is the language sometimes used. And they talk about the mixed emotions, excited maybe about a new forever family, and also the loss in having their parents' parental rights terminated. So, children at 9 to 11 tend to be pretty concrete. Everything's good or bad. And we really focus on, again, the importance of mixed emotions. This unit sort of culminates in a panel night where we bring in adults who initially either grew up in out-of-home care or now have had some child welfare involvement when growing up. And the panelists answer the children's questions. I'll tell you more about that. Although these children are preteens, 9 to 11 when they enter our program, and some turn 12, they're really on the cusp of adolescence, as I know you all understand. And so we do a unit on anatomy and puberty. For this age, we're not doing formal sex ed. We are just talking about what's happening to our bodies. Dealing with peer pressure, resisting, refusal skills are really important for this age. And then we have a huge focus on program ending and healthy endings. The program does end. Children do graduate, and both mentoring and the skills group ends. And so we focus on future orientation. The young people have career shadows where they shadow somebody in their profession or career of interest. And again, I don't have pictures now to exemplify all of this, but we match children on gender and racial ethnic identity for those career shadows, because as you might imagine, so many of our mentors don't match children on important demographic characteristics, and we want them to see somebody in their career that looks like them. And then we have healthy, sessions on healthy goodbyes, and they do graduate, and it's a big celebration. The mentoring piece of the program, the graduate students who serve as mentors are spending, 2 to 3 hours per week with each child that they mentor, helping them generalize the skills that they learn in skills group, helping connect them with extracurricular activities. It's a huge piece of our program that build on their strengths and interests. Helping them identify other adult role models in their communities. It could be in their homes, their places of worship, if that's important to them, obviously their schools, after school programs. And mentoring visits look a lot like community-based mentoring. If I was able to show pictures, or if you just had a bird's eye view of what mentoring looks like, mentors are in children's communities, engaging in, throwing a football or doing an art project with them. And they're infusing these skills that the children are being taught through these mentoring visits that are really very organic and driven by what the child's interests are. We're really focusing on engaging young people in their communities and teaching them to advocate for themselves, such that when the program is over, one, they have a web of support because of, the mentors work to connect them with other adults and positive peers, and that they can advocate and ask for things themselves. So the role of the mentor, again, is to create this web of support and to provide staunch advocacy during the time they're working with them. Just a quick aside, because I always get asked this, what is your training of interns and mentors? They do receive weekly individual supervision, weekly group supervision. There's a weekly seminar where we review a lot of important roles of the mentor, and as well as information they need to know. And we also have a bi-weekly Sparks meeting where we think and talk about how to spark interest in children in different ways, and identify what are children's sparks, and again, how can we infuse skills training into our visits. Special program activities include children creating a life book. And so this is something, again, if you're a caseworker out there listening, that you might think about. And it's not the traditional life book from way back when, which I think was more about young people chronicling, maybe all their experiences before and during care. That is something that can go in this life book, but we send home activities or springboards for activities each week that young people can do with their mentors, with their foster parents, with their birth families. And it's not all written like you can see here. This one talks about changes. So there can be activities that young people engage in with their mentors around all of the skills that we're talking about. So this one was to talk about, again, not being so black and white when there are big changes. We're talking about mixed feelings here. And as I said, we've done longitudinal follow-up. So we've interviewed some young people, 10 to 14 years post-program, and some of them still have their life books. So the first mentoring visit is for the mentor and the young person to go and purchase a 3-ring binder, and then buy stuff to decorate it. And again, they can put in anything they want in their life book, including, again, some fun activities that they've done with their mentor during the program. Another important special activity are cultural presentations. Again, since there's mismatches for young people when they're placed in care, or even if they just have child welfare involvement, therapists are often, caseworkers are often white females. And again, the diversity of young people's identities are not always a match. So everybody in the program does cultural presentations. This includes the mentors, this includes the program staff, and of course, children. And the goals are to really encourage self-exploration, self-respect, and respect for others, to support everyone's problem solving and perspective taking skills. And it's so powerful to see how this happens as everybody is sharing their culture, and young people and the mentors and the staff all can have sort of connects around this. And it helps people understand the differences and uniqueness that everybody brings to group. And it really encourages these connections. This happens during the dinner period of the group when everybody gets together. And so there is a worksheet young people can fill out. It often spurs them, with the support of their mentor, to talk to family members to get more information about their background and their cultural history. And young people can explore any area they're interested in. So one of the most unique ones was a child talking about how skateboarding was their culture. And they bring in foods, they might do traditional dances, read stories, show pictures, etc. We also, as I talked about before, have a panel night, which is a group of adults who in the initial years, again, all had experienced out-of-home care, and now have had some child welfare involvement. And so the children routinely say, some of them each year, I want to be just like them when I grow up. I mean, somebody who's got a family, a job, a car, a house, whatever it may be, and grew up in foster care, for example, is very empowering to them. And I'm going to show you the young people plan the whole evening. So they, do decorations, they budget for food, they survey people, they send out invites, they come up with questions. These are, from 2010, so a long time ago now, but the questions are still the same as we continue this year after year. And the children, while they come up with questions, they may veer from those questions during the panel. So it's typically a group of 3 to 4 adults who have varied backgrounds in terms of their child welfare involvement. And here are some of the questions from 2010. Where are you from? Did you go back to your birth parents? If so, how long did that take? Did you ever want to go back to your birth parents? Were you ever glad to be away from your birth parents? Did anyone in your family pass away that made you depressed? How does it feel being you? What are things that helped you stay strong during your tough times? What was most helpful thing in being in out-of-home care? Did you have a mentor? And who influenced you the most in a positive way? And one of the children spontaneously wrote a couple thank you notes. I'll share one here because I think it exemplifies sort of the power of just this one night. Dear Tracy, you have reminded me to be proud of who I am and to never let my childhood define me. Your story was so sad and made me realize my dad's drug abuse isn't what I have to fix, it's what I have to learn from. You are a fantastic panelist, and we all have to think positive in order to succeed in what we want, and I wasn't realizing that till now. Thanks and fondly, child's name. P.S. I think you've come a long way. Out of the mouth of babes, right? We end the program with a field day. We literally go outside and play. Young people often haven't had that experience in a group setting, and so it's an opportunity for us to do that. And then they graduate from the program, and all I can show you is not graduation pictures, but a cake from year one's program, Costco cake. It's a huge celebration, especially for young people who may have lived in multiple homes, been in multiple schools throughout the 9 months and have stuck with this program. And here's a card one of the young people made for the group as they were graduating. All right, so I can, share, a lot of stories, but people want to understand, does this have the intended impact? And one of the most important things when we're thinking about developing a new program and then scaling it up is, will young people and their families engage in the program? And then, of course, what are the more policy relevant and youth and family relevant outcomes as well? So in our trial, so in the research part, 95% of those who were offered the program enrolled. And again, it's a very generalizable sample to the Denver metro area. In that we recruited all 9 to 11-year-olds who had been placed in out-of-home care over the prior year. So it's a really high rate of enrollment. And over the 10 years we tested this program, there was 87% attendance at mentoring visits and skills groups. And that included young people who dropped out of the program, typically pretty early on. And so their low number of mentoring and skills groups attended were included in those numbers. And 92% graduated from the 9-month program. We have demonstrated, and references are at the end of this presentation, better mental health 6 to 10 months post-intervention on a multi-informant index. So we interviewed children, of course, their caregivers, and their teachers about their anxiety, depression, and trauma symptoms. And we created an index, and for those in the intervention versus those in a control group who completed all of the assessments, including a baseline assessment. And we can talk more about the control group if folks are interested, but we compare outcomes for those two groups. Specifically, young people reported fewer trauma and symptoms of dissociation. 6 to 10 months post, they were less likely to be in mental health treatment, which suggests a cost savings. Obviously, that wouldn't be a plus if there wasn't also a concurrent reduction in mental health symptoms. We had a paper published, I believe it was last week, it could have been the week before, where we demonstrated a reduction from our program in long-term suicidality, suicidal thoughts and behaviors, for those who came into the program with early self-harming or suicidal ideation or a history of attempts. My personal favorite outcome is better quality of life. We've also demonstrated using what we call TRAILS records. You may have a different SACWA system in Florida, but using child welfare records, we demonstrated a reduction in residential placements for children who started the program in non-kinship out-of-home care. There were 44% fewer placement changes. They were 5 times as likely to have achieved permanency a year post-program. There were 3 times more adoptions for those who had TPR, and 2 times as many children had reunified. And as you can see, there's nothing in our program. I've shared with you sort of the major components where this is a focus. So it's never been a focus of our program to have these placement and permanency outcomes. We don't go to court. We don't push for any type of permanency outcome for young people. We really want our mentoring and skills group program to be a safe space for children and families that is very separate from child welfare. Yes, we communicate with caseworkers regularly to information share as appropriate, and we do sometimes have to make hotline calls and other kinds of things. But that is not a focus, and yet this was sort of a byproduct of just focusing on children's, again, positive youth development. We've also demonstrated using both self-report and court records of delinquency following children again into young adulthood, that there was less self-reported and delinquency and court records for delinquency charges longer term. There's only been one cost study done, and it was done back in 2014, and it only costed out congregate care costs and foster care daily rates. And this was a study not done by us, but by some child welfare researchers. The cost savings of the program at the time was over $7,000, and the cost to implement the program per child was only $6,000. And again, this doesn't include cost savings by virtue of reducing mental health and delinquency related costs. So we think this is probably a highly cost-effective program, but more research needs to be done. Importantly, we have done research looking at who engages in the program and whether or not program outcomes differ as a function of demographic characteristics and also out-of-home care placement characteristics. So we've looked at, for example, are kinship care families or children placed there more likely to engage than those in non-relative foster care? Are we only demonstrating outcomes for one group, and that doesn't seem to be the case. The program, based on its evidence, has been listed on a number of registries and other program compendias you can see here. The preteen program is listed as a supported program on the Title IV Prevention Services Clearinghouse. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Here's where it's listed. These categories are where it's listed on the Evidence-Based Clearinghouse for Child Welfare. So again, even though we're not diagnosing children with PTSD, for example, or focusing specifically on trauma, we do talk about change and loss, but there's not a specific targeted trauma treatment. We are rated as supported by research evidence for reducing trauma symptoms. And these other areas you can see as well here. There's also been calls to replicate the science associated with this in the UK over the past summer, as well as there was a statewide California RFP to implement this program in California. They called it a youth-driven program. So we're really just at the beginning, I think, of scaling up and outside of Colorado, although we have implemented it 1 year in Chicago, Illinois. I'm going to tell you now quickly about our teen program because I think, again, some of the strategies we use in this program may be useful in your work with young people. So as soon as we became, known as an evidence-based program, the number one question when people would call us and say, we're interested in your program is, do you have a similar program for teens? And at the time, we didn't. In addition, the number of children that were placed in foster care was dropping precipitously. So as we were thinking about how to implement our preteen program, which had been developed just for children in foster care initially, in 2012, those numbers were really declining. And we thought, you know what, we need to think about a program that is offered to a more wider array of young people. And so we developed this program for teens for 8th and 9th graders because we knew that transition again to high school was so critical. We also knew from our work that if we were to try to work, let's say, with older youth in 11th or 12th grade, first of all, those who had prior child welfare involvement would be hard to identify if their cases had been closed. And for many of them, they were no longer in school and it would be difficult, again, to identify and engage. As you know, the high school graduation rate for young people in out-of-home care is really low. And so we wanted to sort of help ensure young people were on the right track during this important transition. So for this trial, we recruited young people who had open child welfare cases of varying amounts of time. The only folks we excluded were those with serious and violent juvenile justice involvement because we felt that they couldn't probably be safe necessarily in our program, which is a community-based program, and mentors are driving teens. Again, we didn't exclude young people with significant other types of challenges. So half of the young people were at home when we recruited them, a third were with kin, and the remainder in some type of non-relative out-of-home care. There's some really important key differences from the preteen program, including, obviously, this is a different developmental stage. No longer are we having them come to a weekly skills group. We thought there is no way these 13 to 15-year-olds are going to do that. Plus, a lot of them have had some of that. So we thought we would just do the skills training solely through mentoring, but offer workshops about every 6 weeks where young people and their mentors could come and engage together in some activities. These young people almost always had some type of therapy exposure. It was not always positive, and they really wanted to ensure that our program was not therapy. A lot of them said, I'm open to doing this if it's not therapy, traditional therapy. And so I think, there are a lot of therapeutic elements of our program, and we could assure them that they were going to get to set their own goals and the agenda for mentoring. The goal, the focus is also on young people doing self-assessment. So a lot of these teens had been assessed many times by practitioners, not always given clear results of their assessment. So we wanted these teens to do self-assessment, self-determination, and their own goal setting. And then the focus that was a little bit different than preteens is really on the importance of education and connecting the teens with counselors, with, again, extracurricular activities or curricular activities at their school. And so there was more of a focus on the school setting for mentors to help young people navigate. So the components are, again, guided self-assessment. So the mentors do help young people engage in their own self-assessment, visioning and goal setting. We do skills training. The mentors are encouraged to text or call between or email between visits, so that even though they're meeting once a week, they're really keeping in touch with the teens and maybe supporting them in their tryouts for a team, or good luck on a test or a date or whatever there may be, or just sending them some positive affirmations. They work with young people to acquire resources in their communities, a high focus on community engagement. There isn't as much living situation changes among the teens because most were in kin or living at home. So they're navigating something different, the mentors with the young people. Again, we do a career shadowing exercise. And then we really want to, and this is again something for you to think about in your own work with especially teens, is how to help teens build what we call, and I didn't coin this term, mentor magnet skills. How do they become a magnet for adults to want to engage with them, and giving them just some very little feedback. It's important to text people back or try to look folks in the eye when you're talking to them if you're, asking for something, or to thank people who go the extra mile for you. To show adults that you care and you want their engagement helps adults want to be more invested in you. And we all know young people who have that charisma and charm and that all the adults want to. And then a lot of young people don't have those social skills. And so how do we train them, again, to become a mentor magnet? Because of time, and I do want to end in 5 minutes, I'm going to go again quickly through some of these assessments and then make sure we have time for questions. But if you remember, this is what Wordles used to look like. Here's somebody's sort of get to know you activity. They do posters. We do a school scavenger hunt. Again, if young people want to, what does their school offer? What are they like as a student? The principal did or didn't know me last year because, and again, these are some questions you can just use with teens or even young people to try to understand their backgrounds. How do they spend their out of school time? What are their future educational plans? And that can be wide open. We do timelines where young people can talk about all the places they've lived. This young person talked about how fighting in school got them expelled a lot, and how they really wanted to work on that. They can do genograms, eco maps. We have health cards that are just sort of discussion cards. Young people can place them in different groups, like things I feel really good about in terms of my health, things I want to work on, things I maybe need some outside support, or things I don't want to talk about too, with their mentors. So we bring a lot of activities as options for mentoring visits, but there are nothing that is required for young people, because they're going to do their own visioning and goal setting. And that doesn't happen right at the beginning of the program. It sort of happens midway through, after they've done these assessments, after they've done a lot of rapport building, and even after they've done some emotion regulation, potentially skill building. We want young people to identify strengths and goals in these domains, their own identity development, relationships, education, activities, career development, and health. And we call it the I reach domains. So again, this is another, I think, useful framework outside of our program. We haven't trademarked this I reach yet, but we may. So please give us credit if you're going to use this acronym. But to help folks think beyond maybe what the focus or crisis is of the day, on what, again, their goals might be in all of these different areas of their lives. And for health, we mean both physical and mental health. The mentors are trained to work with young people in 3 big buckets with bigger font here, and then some smaller buckets. any goal that a young person sets is going to require some emotion regulation, some healthy communication, and important problem solving skills. And so mentors are trained again to work with the teens in developing these skills. And for each teen, it looks different because they might have excellent communication skills, but really hard time problem solving and slowing down and thinking of different kinds of ways to address a problem. And then, for some teens, really, they want to focus on healthy behaviors or need more academic and organizational support. So those are important as well. But we needed to focus more on three major buckets in our training of mentors. And mentors work with young people through skill education and training. They look up things together on what happens when you do relaxation to your body. They might look up about what happens to heart rate and other kinds of things. So they research these issues. They might role play scenarios like talking to a teacher or a coach. They practice these things in real life, and the mentors provide feedback to youth, and they encourage the youth to self-reflect on their progress as well. They're also connecting them again with resources. A huge piece of this is what happens in mentoring visits. And a lot of our young people are involved in multiple systems, certainly schools, the child welfare system, and courts, unfortunately. So we really focus on having fun while sneaking in skills practice. This is a self-help book that a young person created with their mentor during our program. And again, I'm going to skip over because of time. We do have workshops, as I talked about, giving young people an opportunity to interact with peers in a positive way and practice skills. And the young people, or the topics include team building and trust. We have a community service project. Sexual health is one of our workshops. So the recruitment and retention and engagement rates are about 10% less in our teen program, which is maybe understandable given that they're teens. And also, we really thought it might even be lower given that the majority of children were living, or teens were living at home. And we thought families might be reticent to engage in a program by which their family was identified through child welfare. But 80% agreed to participate, 86% of those who were randomized to the intervention began it, and 86% completed it. And mentors met with youth an average of 23 of 30 times, and that again includes those who withdrew from the program. We have program satisfaction outcomes that are really high. And then this program finished the trial much more recently. So we have one published paper. I'm going to skip through this. If you get the recording, you can read the nice quotes that are really empowering. And caregivers also found the program really helpful. But we published the first outcome on permanency. It was the lead article in a child welfare special issue back in 2020. Intervention youth were 3 times more likely to report that their cases were closed than control youth, 2.5 years after the program began. And youth who received the intervention had fewer court charges and lower self-reported delinquency. These are unpublished findings to date, other than a report that we have. So look for that coming out. So I think this program is highly aligned with the Family First Prevention Services Act, including meeting the goals of improving mental health, increasing permanency, reducing congregate care, supporting kinship care, and of course, using evidence-based practices. We have a training and consultation model we've developed for those who want, agencies that want to implement our program. And there's our initial training group back from 2015. We had folks from Chicago as well as the United Kingdom come over. We've implemented this program, as I said, in Chicago for a year with high rates of engagement that mirror the rates we found in our trials. And so I am going to stop there and take questions. There are references, so I'll pause on this slide for a minute. And folks are welcome to email me too for further information or any references. Here is my email, and here is our website link.
Thank you to everyone for coming.
Thanks for hosting.